the graduate fellowship advisor at the Office of Graduate Studies here. She runs a blog that talks about different fellowship opportunities that UCSD students can get, and she's going to talk today about ways to fund your graduate career.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me. And yes, today I wanted to talk about mostly just opportunities for getting funding in graduate school in general. I also have some notes on how to put together a good funding application, but I thought it might be a little premature for that. So, like, if you want me to talk about that, I can. But first, let's talk about what opportunities are out there. Are you guys rising seniors, rising juniors?
Mostly seniors and some juniors.
Okay, and I'm gathering that maybe most of you are thinking about going to graduate school. Anybody thinking about something other than philosophy for graduate school? Thinking about changing fields? Okay. What other fields are you thinking about going into? Law. Oh, okay. Anything else?
Political science.
Political science. Okay. So political science is, like philosophy, another academic department, so that would be considered graduate school. Law school is considered professional school, right? So funding for that is, frankly, outside my area of expertise. I can point you to one resource, at least, that you can think about for that. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about what types of funding there are out there, because I know that when I was about where you are right now and thinking about applying to graduate school, I really didn't understand what graduate school funding meant. I have a PhD in linguistics, by the way, but my undergraduate degrees were in English literature and German, so I did change for graduate school. And I went to a presentation that my undergraduate college hosted that made it sound like there was one fellowship out there, it was the NSF, and if you didn't get that, you had no funding. Like, it was just completely misinformative. So there are various ways you can pay for graduate school through both employment and then fellowships and grants. Have you talked about TA-ships and RA-ships at all?
Not really, I guess.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about employment, just so that they know that that's out there too. So you can be employed to work for your department at the same time that you're going to school with them. So a lot of you have probably had TAs in some courses, teaching assistants, right? Like Intro to Philosophy would have probably been a big course with lots of teaching assistants. And so you might get offered a position doing that. And there are various levels of employment at the teaching assistant sort of under that umbrella. For example, at UCSD, we have, you could be an instructor of record, a teaching assistant, a reader, or a grader, just for example. Graders often don't even have to attend class, they just grade papers. Readers attend class and grade papers and maybe hold office hours for people. Teaching assistants might lead discussion sections, they're more active, they have to attend all the courses and help the students more actively. And then you, after a year or two of experience, you might even get to be instructor of record for a course, which means that you actually are teaching the entire course yourself. Then you can also get a job as a research assistant or an RA. At UCSD, we call them GSRs, graduate student researchers. Most universities call them RAs. That means that you're working with a faculty member to help them conduct their research. So usually it's like a 20-hour per week commitment, although when I was an RA, I know that it was never steadily 20 hours a week. One week I would do 3 hours of work, and then in another week I might do 30, but they pay you as if you're always doing 20 hours a week. And you'll do things like read journal articles for them and give them one-page summaries of what you've read, or analyze data for them, summarize things for them, etc. Help them write up articles. And you can get paid to do that. So those are the two main types of employment you might get that would help you pay for graduate school. And then usually, so if you get that, that'll pay for your tuition and fees, and then pay you a stipend, or a salary, I should say, on top of that. Usually, well, the amount really varies by department. I don't want to speculate on that. But you can also apply to get fellowships. Fellowships are nice because you just, instead of being paid to work for somebody else, you're being paid just to do your own schoolwork. So they just flat, sometimes pay your tuition and fees, and then will pay you a stipend, and let you do your own coursework. For the first couple years, you're focusing entirely on coursework, and then later on, you're focusing entirely on your own research, and you don't have to worry about working for someone. So that's really nice. It lets you focus on what you need to do. And I'll talk a little bit later about some specific fellowships that you might get. Then there are also what are called grants. The fellowships fund you, the person, and they pay you a living stipend to do things like pay rent, buy groceries. Grants fund your research. So they'll pay you for things like buying the books you need. So cost of research, buying books you need to read, travel if you need to go somewhere to collect data or consult archives. Maybe if you have to pay to get into archives, the grant will pay for that. I'm not sure what other costs of research philosophers tend to have, but
conference presentations maybe? What a grant.
A few grants will pay for that. That's relatively rare because that's not the cost of research, that's the cost of presentations, you know? But so that's the difference between fellowships and grants, which is a common question that I get. So when you apply to graduate school, oftentimes the departments that you've applied to will put together a package, and they'll make you an offer, and they'll say, we're guaranteeing you, if you come here, we will give you this many years of support at this level. So for example, the place that I accepted, so first of all, 2 places accepted me and did not give me any funding, and I didn't consider going there because as far as I'm concerned, it is not worth it to go to graduate school and end up $80,000 in debt or something. My personal advice is only accept funding from a place only accept an offer from a place that is going to offer you some sort of funding package. So the place that I went, for example, offered me a 4-year package. The first year, they gave me a straight fellowship, so I could just focus on coursework. Then I had 1 year TA-ship and 2 years as an RA. And that much was guaranteed. I knew going in I had 4 years of funding. And then it took me more than 4 years to get my degree, and they did continue to hire me as a TA. But it was nice to know up front, okay, 4 years is guaranteed. And, you know, so you can compare the different packages that the places put together for you and, you know, weigh those against the quality of the program, of course, and then decide which one to accept. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of what you might get from different departments, and you actually can negotiate some. So you can say, you know, I've had professors tell me this is perfectly fine. You know, you can say to somebody, I'd really like to go to your program because I really think it's a great program, but this other school is offering me another year of funding. And then if they really want you, the school that you want, they might put together, you know, they might see if they can scrape together a few more $1,000s to offer you or something to try to sweeten the deal, and that's perfectly fine. Yeah. So then there are a couple different, well, I mean, there are many, many different types of fellowships, but 2 broad categories I'll separate them into are intramural fellowships and extramural fellowships. Intramural fellowships come from within the university that you are attending, within the walls of that university. Extramural fellowships come from outside agencies, be they federal government agencies, state agencies, private foundations, etc. Intramural fellowships can come from sort of a couple different ways. They can come from the academic department itself that admits you. So sometimes, like if you apply to a political science department, they have a chunk of money that they're allowed to distribute to graduate students, and they'll say, you know, we have this money and we want to give you this many $1,000s a year to come study with us. Or they might come from the central graduate office at the school. So for example, at UCSD, the Office of Graduate Studies, are any of you considering applying to UCSD? Okay. So one thing that we offer are called San Diego Fellowships or Cota Robles Fellowships. And those I'm actually on the review committee for. And so each academic department gets to nominate a certain number of students to us, and then we read that pool of nominees and choose them. And that gives you, I want to say, 4 years of funding as a fellowship. And the requirements generally are you have to have overcome barriers to education in some way, be it like, you know, growing up in a disadvantaged family or going to bad schools or, you know, having a physical disability that kept you from going to school regularly, whatever that is, overcoming some sort of barrier to education. And you have to show a commitment to diversity in higher education, which can mean, oh, I've mentored other women in the philosophy department and helped them pursue higher education, or, you know, I've tutored middle schoolers or whatever it might be. So that just happens to be our criteria, but I'm just saying. So I'm on that review committee, and then we pick people, and then, yeah, and then you get this fellowship from within the school. Then, and for those intramural fellowships, oftentimes you don't really have to do much to actively apply for them separately from applying from the university as a whole or to the academic department. Usually it'll just be like, there'll be a box to check. Do you want to be considered for fellowships? And you check yes. In the case of our San Diego fellowships, you do have to write a couple essays, but it's actually part of the grad school application process, so it's really not much extra effort. Conversely, for extramural fellowships, you generally need to put together a whole special application packet, and it's a separate effort from your grad school applications. And how do I want to say this? Okay, so first of all, you can apply for a lot of them. Very few people get everything that they apply for, so it's fine to apply for 5, 6, 7, and then maybe you'll get 1 or 2 if you're lucky. And it's an ongoing process. You don't just apply when you're first going in, because like if you don't get them your first year, you can still apply in fall of your first year of grad school, and then maybe you'll get funding for years 2 through 4 of grad school or something. And that's for what are called predoctoral fellowships, which are aimed at people in the beginning stages of graduate school. And then for later in graduate school, there are what are called dissertation completion fellowships, which pay you a stipend to just sit and write for a year when you're finishing up your dissertation. So obviously you would be applying for those later on in school. And keep in mind, this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people making. You always have to apply a long time in advance. The minimum lead time I'm going to say is 6 months, and oftentimes it's a year. So particularly for the big predoctoral fellowships, those applications are going to be due September, October, November of the year before they start. So if you're thinking about applying for graduate school this fall is also when you're going to be applying for predoctoral fellowships at the same time. You're putting together those applications. They're due September, October, November, roughly, and then you'll find out maybe next April or May if you've gotten them, and then they would start the funding in July or August or September of next year. And that holds true throughout your graduate education. You always have to be applying. Basically, you want to be thinking about a year in advance. What funding do I need next year? That's what I'm going to apply for this year. Every year in about April and May, I get students coming to me saying, I need funding for the fall, and it's just way too late. You always have to be applying the fall before. So here are some fellowships that you might think about applying for that I thought at least some people might be eligible for here. One is the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowships. These are for people who are committed to a career in teaching and research at the college or university level. So if you know that you aren't going into academia, this is not for you, but if you're pretty sure you are going to academia, then you can consider the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowships. Those provide 3 years of support with a stipend of $24,000 a year. And I should note that fellowships are often much more lucrative than employment. For some fellowships, you might be getting twice as much as you'd be offered for a TA-ship. So that's another good reason to get them, besides the fact that they let you focus on your work. If any of you happen to be doing the philosophy of science, which I think is something that we focus on here, or at least we offer, then you would be eligible for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, the NSF-GRFP. So even though it's the National Science Foundation, they do fund the philosophy of science and the history of science. And that gives you 3 years of support at $32,000 a year, plus part of your tuition and fees. That's incredibly lucrative. Some of you might consider doing the Fulbright program. This is actually a grant, the U.S. Student Fulbright program, that sends you abroad for a year to conduct research. And in fact, we have a UCSD philosopher abroad on a Fulbright right now in Austria, working with philosophers there in his field. And there's also the Fulbright Hayes Doctoral Dissertation Research Abroad program, which likewise sends you abroad for 6 to 12 months to conduct your research, and that pays you well. Actually, the stipend is quite generous. You can also look into the American Association of University Women, AAUW. They offer fellowships both for U.S. citizens and for international students at various levels of education. So you can check out their website. Also check out the Social Science Research Council, SSRC. Despite their name, they definitely fund humanists quite a lot, and they have all kinds of wonderful fellowships. They are the only agency I know of that offers a dissertation proposal development fellowship. Most agencies either they'll do the predoctoral fellowship for when you're first starting out, and the dissertation completion fellowship. Let me just finish this sentence, then I'll take your question. The SSRC offers a fellowship to help you, like in that middle stage when you're working on developing your dissertation proposal. They're the only ones I know of who have that. Yeah.
Can you please re-say the name that was right before this fellowship?
Before the Social Science Research
the
Council?
Women Association.
The American Association of University Women, AAUW. And then another thing that I thought some of you might be eligible for is the Paul and Daisy Soros, S-O-R-O-S, Fellowship for New Americans. This you're eligible for if you yourself are a naturalized U.S. citizen or if both of your parents are naturalized U.S. citizens. And that gives you 2 years of support at $25,000 a year stipend plus your tuition. And in case this is applicable to any of you, there's the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, which offers both undergraduate and graduate funding of various types. But that is just a small sample of the types of funding that are available, and I want to really stress that so you don't walk out of here thinking, okay, there are 5 things I can apply for, and that's it. There are probably hundreds of opportunities out there, tons of them that I don't know about. So I wanted to talk about places you can look for other funding that I haven't mentioned. One is my blog that was mentioned earlier. Oh, but you have to have a UCSD single sign-on to access it. So you guys can't see that yet, sorry. But maybe you can get a current graduate student here to let you look over their shoulder or something, at least while they search it. But then other things that you do have access to, there's Pivot, which is pivot.cos.com, and you'll have access to that if you use a UCSD computer, which I think you can probably go to the library here and do. And Pivot has funding, they claim to have 400,000 funding opportunities in all different areas of study, including, so for those of you going to law school, you should check out Pivot, pivot.cos.com. The head of my unit in my office has an MBA, and she found MBA funding on Pivot. So they have, now this has funding for people all the way from undergraduates through tenured professors, so there's a lot to sift through, but you can almost certainly find something there. Another to look is the UCLA GRAPES database. It's grapes like the fruit. And that stands for Graduate and Postdoctoral Extramural Support. So that's nice because it's just for grad students and postdocs. So they've already filtered out a lot of the stuff that isn't relevant to you. And it's free for anyone to use. And they have a really nice search form. I find them a very user-friendly site. And I just did a quick search and I found 111 funding opportunities for philosophy. Then you might spend some time looking at the Foundation Center. That's foundationcenter.org. The Foundation Center is actually aimed at nonprofits and not-for-profits. But I have had students in the humanities and social sciences tell me that they have, and arts, tell me that they have found funding there. But they have an extremely user-unfriendly site. So if you're going to try the Foundation Center, you have to like dedicate a few hours just to figuring out how the heck to search the site. So I would start with the GRAPES database. That's much easier to use. Another hint is to look at the CVs of people you admire. So if you have faculty members at your current institutions or where you think you want to go, who you know do work that is like what you want to do, check out their CVs and see what awards they got in graduate school, and then you can apply for the same thing. And don't be afraid to stretch your discipline. Just because something says history at the top of it doesn't mean that it's only going to go to somebody in the history department, right? You can just argue for why your project is relevant, and they'll still fund you. It doesn't matter what department you're in. It's does your project meet the needs of this agency, or does it meet what they're interested in funding? And I always tell people that money begets money. Don't shun small fellowships. If you can get something small to start out with, then you can put that on your CV, and there's kind of a snowball effect. Once one agency funds you, other agencies will say, oh, this group thought that she was really great. We want to fund her too. For example, the first funding that I got for graduate school was a $400 travel award, which is very small, obviously, but I put it on my CV, and then I got a $7,000 doctoral dissertation improvement grant from the NSF. So there is kind of a snowball effect. And that's, so like I said, I have tips for putting together a good application, but for now, do you guys have questions on what graduate education funding means, or, you know?
I've always wondered if you're, let's say you are accepted to Fulbright, if your travel begins halfway through your graduate education, if it doesn't begin that fall, can you have a leave of absence? I know it varies, but here, and if so, will some scholarships take away your scholarship because you went on a leave of absence, even if it was for Fulbright?
Okay. So in terms of, if I leave of absence, you mean can you get permission to leave the campus? Yes, absolutely. People do that all the time, going away from UCSD or any other campus to conduct research. That's perfectly normal. As far as leave of absence in terms of no longer being enrolled at the university,
no, it's more like if you're going to Fulbright and you know that you're coming back.
Yeah, so that's fine, but yeah, that happens all the time. That's perfectly normal because you're still a student then, right? You're still affiliated with your home university. You just don't happen to be on the campus at the time.
Okay.
It's kind of like if you studied abroad. You know, you're still a student at your home university while you're studying abroad. It's similar. But you should know that, at least at UCSD specifically, we do require you to still enroll in credit hours. You're not allowed to take a leave of absence, which would mean you're not enrolled. You enroll what's called in absentia and pay part of your tuition and fees. But different universities will do that differently. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the answer.
So do you have to already be in a program to get Fulbright funding?
Specifically Fulbright? No. So because the Fulbright Hayes doctoral dissertation research abroad, yes. The U.S. student Fulbright program, no, because to be eligible for that, you just have to have a bachelor's degree by the time you go abroad. It's not even aimed at graduate students necessarily. You can have no plans to go to graduate school and still do a Fulbright. You just have to have your bachelor's by the time you go abroad. But other awards, the answer could be yes or no depending on what they are. So like for the Ford, for example, you need to be applying to graduate school because it is a graduate school pre-doctoral fellowship, but you don't have to know where you're going. You probably will be applying to the Ford at the same time that you apply to schools. So you say, well, I'm going to one of these 4 schools. I just don't know which one yet.
And what do the funding applications usually consist of?
So that's going to depend on the award and then what. Actually, can I come back to that question in case other people have sort of more general questions?
Sure.
But I will cover that.
Yeah. I guess typically, do you suggest is it mostly like self-research, self-navigation through these different areas of funding, or if you know which school you want to go to, or maybe you're even already accepted to a specific school but you need more funding, is there like a certain department or a certain person, or like it's kind of like a financial mentor that you would find at the school that would kind of help you navigate some of these things, kind of like you're doing for us, but maybe at like the specific school you want to go to or you are at?
There's not like a standard title that would be at every university. My suggestion would be to contact the department that you're thinking about going to. Contact that academic department, both whatever faculty members you have contact with there, and also, like here at UCSD, we have a staff position called a graduate coordinator, which is the person who's in charge of sort of, you know, making sure you graduate, make sure you fill out all your forms on time, you know, have you taken all the courses required, etc. You can contact, if they have an equivalent of that person, you can contact them, and they might be able to direct you to whoever does it at the university that you're interested in. Okay, so then we can talk about application components. Different applications will, of course, have different things, but generally what they're going to look for at the pre-doctoral level, so when you're looking for a general pre-doctoral fellowship, you'll need oftentimes 3 to 5 letters of reference. You might need a CV. You'll probably need transcripts. And then you got the parts that you usually do not need a budget for these because it's usually set. Like they say, we are giving you $24,000 in stipend, period. So you don't need to put together a budget. But what you do write then will be various statements which differ depending on the award. Some of them might have a 2 to 3 page personal statement and then maybe a 3-page research proposal, for example. And at this level, the personal statement is not going to be an autobiography. It's not like a general, this is how I grew up. It's more, this is how I came to this area of research. This is how I've developed my passion in this field. This is why I am so excited to study this particular area of research. Okay, so it's a personal statement of your interest in what you're proposing to do. Then your research proposal, 3 pages really isn't that much to talk about what you're going to do. And the good news is, at this level, if you do something different, they won't ask for the money back. They understand that most people's research plans evolve during graduate school. So you should say, this is what I think I'm going to do my dissertation on. But if you do your dissertation on something else, that's fine. Now, if you switch and do like engineering, that would be a problem, and they would ask for the money back. But as long as it's still, relatively similar, that's okay. But you should present it as though you have a good plan and that as though you know what you're doing. Frankly, this is kind of a tip for getting into graduate school too. I told, in your statements for graduate school, act like you know what you're doing your dissertation on. I did that. I ended up doing something completely different, and no one ever called me on it. Okay, so you should act confident, but it's okay if you completely change your mind. And I think you should be honest about what you're interested in, obviously, and you don't want to just make something up that you know you're not going to do. You should present what you think you are going to do, but it's not a contract. Conversely, later on, when you're applying for grants that will fund your dissertation research, that is more of a contract because they're funding the research itself, not you. So once you're applying for grants, yes, they're saying this is research that we think needs to be done. So if you say you're doing one type of research and then you do something else, they will ask for the money back. But at the predoctoral fellowship level, that's not as important. Which doesn't mean you should lie. I mean, you should certainly be honest, and is good if you have a good idea of what you want to do. But anyway, those are the components generally. Will be a relatively short statement of research plans, research proposal, probably a personal statement, letters of reference, and transcripts and CV, maybe. We have plenty of time. Do you guys feel like you are in a place where you would be ready for me to talk about how to put together a good proposal? Or is that something? Yes? Okay. Then, yeah. Do people have other questions at this point, aside from how to, yeah?
I don't know what a CV is.
I'm sorry. Curriculum vitae. It's like an extended resume. So your resume is usually 1 page, maybe 2 pages, and it just highlights, these are the things I've done that are relevant to this thing that I'm applying for, like this job. It's very succinct. A CV is, thank you for saying that, I forget what people don't know. It's much more extensive. You'll see people with 10 or 15 page long CVs. It lists basically like everything you've done. So you'll have your whole educational history on there, and then eventually like all your publications, all your conference presentations, foreign languages that you speak, relevant work, all academic work experience, maybe invited talks, and at this point your CV is not going to be that extensive, of course. At this point you might have a 1-page CV, but it'll grow eventually. So like if you already have a publication or 2, that would definitely go on there, which is something that you wouldn't normally put on a resume because people hiring you for jobs don't necessarily care about that.
And then is that something that is put onto kind of like a disciplinary website where people can access you based on the discipline, or is that just like a personal resume that you develop yourself and then send out when it's appropriate? Usually the latter. Now sometimes when people have personal websites, they'll post their CV to that.
And if you need help putting these together, first of all, go to the websites of faculty members that you've worked with, and you can just download theirs and copy their format. But also, probably faculty members where you are right now will be willing to help you put it together. Go to their office hours and say, here's my draft CV, what do you think? And then they'll help you with that. Also, when you get to graduate school, I know that in my second semester of graduate school, we took a course that was like Intro to Grad Research, and one of the things we did was put together a CV. So, you'll get help doing it eventually. Okay, so then let's talk about putting together a good application. Yeah.
Are there like research opportunities that are available to us as undergrads that you know?
Sure, some universities offer those. So where I did my undergraduate at the University of Oklahoma, for example, the Honors College had like an honors undergraduate research program where faculty members could apply to get an undergraduate research assistant. You might see if your university offers that. There are things called REUs, Research Experiences for Undergraduates, which are funded by federal agencies but then hosted at individual universities. You can see if your university has any REUs.
I guess I'm thinking more like extramural was the term that you used.
I'm sure there are. That's outside my area of expertise.
Okay.
So I'm not qualified to comment on it. I'm sorry. Yes.
This is sort of unrelated, but if you're not sure if you want to get your PhD, but you definitely want to get your master's, would that change anything that you were talking? Is there anything like that you should know ahead of time?
First of all, I think that that's a wise approach. I think that's great that you know that maybe the PhD isn't for you. It is harder for people to get funding for master's degrees than for PhDs, unfortunately. Departments usually want to get PhD students because for whatever reason it adds their prestige. Oftentimes departments, certainly outside agencies, are more, like for extramural funding, there's a lot more of that available for PhD students than for master's students, unfortunately. And but I would say it is more likely that you will still be able to get like a TA-ship. So it's not hopeless to get funding. That said, in the humanities, sometimes departments don't accept you if they know. Like there are some departments that just do not accept terminal master's students. So I don't know, does UCSD?
No.
No. So what you have to do in that case, unfortunately, is tell them you want to do a PhD and then drop out after 2 years and apply for your master's. It's not great, but I mean, it's better to find a place that.
You mean to the fellowship, or are you talking about the school?
To the school.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, better to find a school that accepts terminal master's students. But I think they're going to be relatively rare in the humanities. A lot of them view a master's degree as kind of a consolation prize for the people who couldn't make it through the PhD, unfortunately. I personally have no problem with people getting master's degrees. I think that's wonderful. But you should just be aware that it's going to be relatively hard to find support for that.
If you thought maybe I'm going to do a PhD, we'll see how it goes, and you got funding for a PhD, you got a fellowship or something, and then you decided this isn't for me, I just want to leave with a master's, would there be a problem with that? Would somebody ask for their money back if you got 2 years of a pre-doctoral fellowship and then you decided you didn't want to complete the PhD?
I would say usually it's not a problem. Now, if you told them in advance, they wouldn't keep funding you, right? Like if after the end of your first year you said, well, I'm just getting my master's degree, then they probably wouldn't fund you for the second year. But if at the end of those 2 years you've gotten it and you say, you know what, I'm leaving, I've decided that this isn't for me, I think that agencies understand that there's going to be attrition. That's kind of a risk of investment for them, and they accept that that's going to happen with some of the people that they fund. My department funded me with the expectation that I would go into academia, but I decided not to. I decided to, get a job outside of academia, and I'm doing this instead. And they didn't punish me for that, right? They may have said, man, we wish we had given that money to somebody else, but, they can't do anything about it. Yes.
I just wanted to say you're absolutely right about PhD programs and accepting master's students, and so it's a lot easier to get funding for your master's if you go somewhere that has just the terminal MA for philosophy, and there are several programs like that.
Okay. Great. I'm glad to hear that they exist. I just wasn't even sure. Okay. So let's talk about, first of all, letters of reference for these applications then. Most of these awards that you're looking for will probably ask for 3 letters of recommendation, which is probably the same number that you'll need for grad school applications, conveniently. So in most cases, at this stage, you'll get the same people write your grad school applications to write your fellowship applications, I would say, usually. You want to get people who know you well, preferably beyond just the classroom. You don't want somebody who's just going to say, yeah, she got an A in my class. At least get somebody who you've taken 2 or more classes with, if possible. And if it's somebody who you've in some way worked with more intensely outside the classroom, like volunteered to do some research with them or been on some kind of special summer program or something, that would be a good choice. At this level, it's perfectly fine for you to have, even though you're applying for graduate fellowships, to have all your letters of reference come from undergraduate professors. That's fine. Now, once you're applying, and even like things that you apply for in the fall of your first year of grad school, I think it's still okay to have your undergraduate professors writing you letters of recommendation because they know that your graduate professors don't know you that well yet. But if you're in your second year of grad school or beyond, you'll want your graduate school professors to be writing you the letters. When you give them the information, first of all, always ask early. Always give them at least a month notice on it. I know some faculty members who will flat out say no if you give them less than 2 weeks notice, just categorically. And generally a month is a good courtesy. And if you can give them longer, so much the better. Make sure that they have all the information for the award right in like the email that you send. Don't just give them a URL and say, hey, I'm applying for this, here's the URL, and then make them look for the information. Don't make them do that work. Do give them the URL for all the information, but also in the body of your email, when you're asking them for a letter of recommendation, say, this is what I'm applying for, this is why I think I'm a good fit, this is what it funds, this is aimed at people who are first-generation Americans, for example, and I fit that because blah, blah, blah. This is how much it would pay me, and I'm attaching a draft of my research proposal that I plan to submit with this application, right? So give them all the information that they need right in the email. Don't make them work to search for that information. You don't want to start out by making this person grumpy, right, when you're asking them for a favor, right? Make it as easy for them as possible. Don't be afraid to prime people a little bit on what to write. First of all, it can help to remind them how they know you, if it's been a year or 2 since they've talked with you. But also, remember you really liked my paper that I wrote on such and such. And maybe you can tell one person, I'd like you to really emphasize my potential to do research in this area, and then you tell another person, I worked with you in that undergraduate TA-ship experience. I'd like you to talk about my potential for teaching well, something like that. You could sort of give them ideas of what you might like them to emphasize. If you are debating among multiple people and you are lucky enough to have a lot of people who could write for you and you can't choose, it might be good to choose the people who write well, because their writing actually reflects on you, for better or worse. So if you can choose people who write well, do so. Yeah. Questions about letters of reference? And for this, also, you definitely want academics to do this. Don't get somebody you've worked for outside of school, because sometimes I'll see people for Fulbright, they'll pick somebody that they worked for and they'll be like, yes, this person was very good at stocking shelves. And that tells me nothing about their ability to do a Fulbright grant. You don't want that. Okay, then in terms of writing your statements, one thing I highly recommend is this article. The author's name is Robert Porter, and it's called Why Academics Have a Hard Time Writing Good Grant Proposals. Why Academics Have a Hard Time Writing Good Grant Proposals. I credit this article with getting me my dissertation grant that I got from the NSF, because I wrote what I thought was a good draft, and then I read this article, and then I started over from scratch, and then I got the grant. Writing, in academia, you're going to be trained to write journal articles, sort of trained. You're going to get used to reading journal articles, and you understand the tone, and you'll get used to that type of writing. Writing a fellowship proposal or a grant proposal is very, very different, in fact. And this article really lays out the differences side by side and makes a really clear comparison, and I found it very helpful. So I suggest that you read this. So one thing to know is that this is persuasive writing. When you write a journal article or like a research article for your classes now, it's objective. It's reporting what's already been done, the research that I did, this is what I found, and sort of your personality is taken out of it, right? It's just objective reporting. For a fellowship proposal, this is persuasive writing, okay? You have to, so it's your personality is very much present in it, and you are persuading people of two things. First, you need to persuade them that this research needs to be done. This research is important and it needs to be done. And secondly, you are the person to do it. So you have to show that you are qualified to carry out this research. You don't want the reviewer saying, wow, this is a fascinating topic. I can't wait to read the results of this, but this person is not going to do it well. I want to fund somebody else to do this research. You don't, you know. Conversely, you don't want them to think, well, this is a very highly qualified candidate, but she has a really boring project, right? Convince them of those two things. And persuasive writing is quite different from simply reporting what's been done. Make sure you know your audience for these proposals. So some proposals, now you won't probably know the exact names of people who will be reviewing, but you should be able to figure out roughly the type of people who will review for it. So for some proposals, you'll be writing for people in your discipline, or even for people in your sub-discipline. And in that case, you can use a lot of specialized terms, right? You can assume that they have a lot of background knowledge in your discipline, and you don't have to define things for them necessarily. But for a lot of other awards, you're going to be writing for a generalist audience, or they might be in your discipline, but they won't be in your sub-discipline, right? So then you've got to think about, okay, what terms am I using that these people will not know? What basic knowledge am I assuming that these people in fact don't have? So getting back to the Fulbright, for example, the Fulbright is not reviewed by discipline at all. It's completely generalist audience. So you might be reviewed by one historian, one literary scholar, and one political scientist. And you've got to make these people understand your research that in your head is like very specialized. You've got to be able to present it for this general audience. So the type of audience you're writing for determines the level of specificity of your writing, okay? And you've got to tailor it to who you're writing to. And sometimes you can go on an agency's website. Sometimes they'll even tell you specifically who the reviewers were in the last year. But not all agencies will do that. But they should at least tell you roughly what type of audience you have. Clarity is always key in these. Unfortunately, in journal articles, sometimes you get rewarded for obfuscating your ideas. For a fellowship proposal, you never will be rewarded for that. You always want to make sure your reviewers understand exactly what you're saying. If they get to the end of your second page and they're like, I have no idea what she's talking about, they might not even read the rest, and they start going to give you money to do it. They have to clearly understand what you plan to do. So don't use unnecessary jargon. Use simple sentences. You can lay things out with bullet points. You can have a timeline. Anything that you can do to make it as clear as possible to the reader what your plans are. Then, once you have what you think is a good draft, have as many pairs of eyes read it as possible. And pay attention to what people have questions on. So get, if possible, a lot of different faculty members to read it, and also your friends, people in other disciplines, what have you. And they'll say, you know, in this paragraph, I really don't understand what it is you're saying. Or this sentence just doesn't make sense to me. Or they might say, I really like your idea, but I'm wondering what you're going to do to deal with such and such. Say, oh, I need to you know, in my head I know what I'm doing to deal with that. I have to put it on the paper, right? So what they have questions about tells you what you need to revise. And be sure to get people who are unfamiliar with what you're doing to read it. So the faculty members that you already work closely with probably already have a good idea of what you're doing. So when they read your draft, of course it's going to make sense to them because they're going in already knowing what you're doing. But your reviewers won't. So you need to get people who are unfamiliar with your work to read it, and then they can really simulate this is what a reviewer will be thinking, right? So don't rely on the people you're closest to give you the feedback that you need. Make sure you answer the prompt. This is something I see people do wrong so often. Sometimes they'll require a statement of past they'll have a past restatement and then a future research statement. And in the future research statement, someone will spend 2/3 of the space talking about things they've already done. No, if it's future-oriented, what you write is future-oriented, right? Or for the American Association of University Women, for example, I know that one of the things, they require an essay on how you have in the past improved access to higher education for women, something like that. And sometimes people will send me drafts that do not mention females or women in the entire draft. Like, no, you're not answering the prompt. So be sure to pay attention to what they're asking and answer that question, not what you want to write about, what they want you to write about. Always start early. I cannot emphasize this enough. You should never be turning in your second or third draft. It's always going to be your fourth or fifth draft at least that you're submitting. My rule of thumb is to always have a good draft, not a draft, but a good draft ready 1 month before the submission deadline. So that should already be at least, like, say, your third draft. And that gives you 2 weeks to kind of step away from it, maybe have other people read it in that time, and then you get the feedback and you can come back to it with fresh eyes and still have 2 weeks to review before you have, and revise before you have to submit. That's my rule of thumb, but I know one faculty member whose rule is you have to be ready 3 months in advance. I personally think that's a little excessive, but you know, the earlier the better in general. Okay, and I think that's most of, well, another thing is follow the directions. Don't try to cheat because they will see that. You can't cheat and give yourself more space to write than everyone else gets. If it says at least 11-point font and you put yours in 10.5 font, they just won't review it. And it will be really easy to tell. Like if I've got a stack of 12 applications and one of them looks different than all the rest, I'm going to tell that, right? So they just won't review your application if you don't follow the directions in that way. Do try to make things look nice for the reviewers. Now some agencies will specify exactly the font point size. Others will say it needs to be at least this big, in which case you can go bigger. Make it easier for the reviewers to read. That's perfectly fine. And like I said, you can do bullet points, you can put headings in bold. If it's a long proposal, you might consider going through and finding like the most important sentences and putting those sentences in bold so that somebody in a hurry to remember what it is that you're working on can go back and just read the sentences in bold and it makes sense. Oh yeah, this is what this person's working on. Make it easy for them to find the most important information. That's perfectly fine to do and a good strategy. Do cast your net wide. Like I said, almost nobody gets everything they apply to, so go ahead and apply for a lot of different things as long as you actually are a good fit for them. Don't apply for something that is, you know, just completely ludicrous and you're just wasting both your and the agency's time, and don't apply for something if you don't have time to put in the effort to put together a good application, right? So you have to balance, okay, how much time do I have to devote to this? How many things do I want to apply for so that I have a good chance of getting something? You know, think about that. But what you think is ludicrous might not be. So there's someone in the communication department here who always gives the example. There was like a grant call out to fund research on improving social interactions of communities, something like that. And it went to somebody studying anthills because they were able to pitch it as, I'm going to learn how ants interact with each other in these anthills, and we'll be able to, by analogy, understand better how humans work with each other. So if you can make you can pitch your research to, yes, I really do fit what you're looking for, then maybe you'll be successful. Yes.
This is kind of a wishful thinking scenario, but say you get a fellowship and it's more money than you actually need. I know that's really crazy, but like, I mean, say you got like a couple fellowships. Is that even possible to get more than one from like outside sources to the point where like maybe best case scenario you get them? Do you have to like, are you accountable in some way to like report what you have gotten and what you haven't gotten and make sure that like you're not just money river or something like that?
So your university will kind of keep track of that, and most agencies won't let you accept 2 different predoctoral fellowships. So if you got both the NSF and the Ford, you'd have to decline one of those. There are some fellowships, though, that will let you sort of take part of the money, right? So, for example, if you got one that covers your tuition and fees and one that doesn't, maybe you would have to decline the stipend part of this one, but you could take the tuition and fees part because that's not duplicating this other award, right? You usually cannot get overlapping payments, okay? And in grants, that definitely works the same way as well. So if you've got 2 grants, you can't have 2 grants paying you money for the same books, right? But this grant can pay you for books and this grant can pay you for travel because that's not overlapping.
Like if one of them is an extramural and the other one's an intramural.
Yeah, you still usually can't have both at the same time, but sometimes you can defer one. So, for example, the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship, that's 3 years of support, but it's payable over 5 years. So if you got the Ford and then a university offered you an intramural fellowship that was for 2 years, then you can tell the Ford, well, I'm going to defer for 2 years while I have these 2 years of funding from my university, and then I'll ask for your funding in years 3, 4, 5 of my degree.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Some awards will let you defer, some of them won't.
I guess in your experience, what if you have, I mean, this is probably a very difficult question to answer, but like rate of success, I mean, for like at UCSD, for like applying to fellowships, applying to these kinds of things, do people often get them, or are they extremely, extremely competitive? I mean, it's a lot of money, so I'm sure they're very competitive.
It depends on the award, but most agencies will actually publish their success rates on their website. So you'll see, they'll say, last year we got this many applications and we were able to make this many awards. So you can probably just directly look that up. Keep in mind, though, that actually I was just reading an article about this last month that came out in this newsletter about published success rate versus real success rate, because the published success rate includes all the half-hearted attempts at putting together an application that they got. If they get 300 applications, 100 of those will have been thrown together at the last minute, and they barely even count. So they really got 200 applications that people put effort into. So you want to be in that pile of the applications that people took seriously, and that by itself already gives you a huge advantage over a lot of your competitors.
What's the earliest you can apply? Like if you plan on taking a year off after to get your bachelor's degree, could you like apply that? Could I start applying like in September for like next year?
Generally not, but that said, some agencies, as I said, will still let you defer. So you could, but it would make more sense to wait and apply the following fall. They don't have an ongoing goal that's like from now until the end of time, we're accepting applications for that. It's like this fall, they are accepting applications for 2015, 2016. And next fall, they'll accept applications for 2016, 2017. Yes. Are there any questions coming in from the people live streaming? Do you take questions that way?
Yes and no.
Oh.
We do take questions that way, but there aren't any right now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So as far as like, I do my own taxes, so would there be, is there usually somebody at a university that helps you kind of navigate that area once you get into like fellowships and grants and things?
Not really, actually. So like in our office, I'm in the financial support unit, and we get questions on taxes all the time, and we have to say we are not licensed tax advisors. The university will give you certain tax forms, but just as a heads up, okay, grants usually are not considered income tax because they're paying for research costs, not your living expenses, unless that grant includes a salary for you, which would be taxable. If you are employed with salary, that's going to be taxable income, but the university will take out taxes like any other employer would, right? It's a job, they're going to take out your taxes. If you get a fellowship with a stipend, that is taxable income, but the university doesn't take taxes out for you because it's not employment, it's a stipend. So you have to figure out how much you owe yourself.
It's the worst. It's heinously complicated, and there's no guidance. And one thing that you have to know is that you have to take the taxes out in advance if you don't want to get hit with a huge bill on April 15th. So, like when I had a fellowship, I had to set it up. There's a website for estimated taxes that you can pay ahead of time, and they give you very little guidance, and the website is horrendously like bad. But like I set it up to take a little bit out every month so that then it wasn't so bad. But it's a huge pain.
What I thought I might do is just add a little bit relevant to what you're talking about for sort of intramural or things that departments will typically offer, specifically in philosophy, because I know something about that. So to just put some flesh on some of those bones. So in most PhD programs, now programs that offer our master's programs will work a little bit differently. But right now I'll just talk about PhD programs like UCSD or most places you would go to, any of the lighter top 40 or 50 or whatever, if you were applying to a PhD program. Standardly, they will all offer support, some kind of support package. So typically you're not going to have to pay your own fees or tuition or anything like that, and you will get some kind of salary to live on. The details of that can differ widely, though, and the details differ in a number of respects. One is whether the support is in the form of fellowship or employment, like Zoe was saying. It's usually a mix, and the mix can vary. Some places give you a lot of fellowship, and you might be employed as a TA, usually as a TA, more rarely as an RA, for 1 or 2 or 3 years. Other places are very heavily on the employment end of it. You will be working as a TA usually or sometimes rarely as an RA for most of the time, and then maybe have a smaller amount of fellowship going anywhere from 0 to 2 years or something like that of fellowship. The other thing that can vary is how much support is guaranteed. So some places will guarantee 4 years or 5 years. Often you can extend beyond that, but I think in those philosophy departments, probably 5 is the lowest. 4 or 5 is the lowest sort of guaranteed number that I've seen. For reference, at UCSD, a few things are kind of in flux right now, but the salary that you would get here, which would be the same whether you were employed or whether you were on some sort of fellowship, is in the 18 to 20K range. That's kind of in flux right now, possibly, but that's the general range, which is kind of in the middle. The lowest I've seen of a sort of well-ranked program is like 12 or 13, and sometimes they can go up into the high 20s. The amount of fellowship that you get, UCSD is on the low end. We guarantee 1 year of supported by the department. Of course, you can get other sources of fellowship, but in terms of what's guaranteed by the department, we guarantee 1 year. the total support, this is where we sort of blow most places out of the water. You're sort of able to get support here for 7 years. And that's because of weird things about the writing programs and how they, whatever, I can talk to you about it later. But that's pretty rare. Most places will, at a minimum, give you 4, but the most I've ever seen is like 6 of guaranteed support. But the take-home message is that kind of gives you an idea of what the range is. You'll be supported one way or another, and now you've got a kind of an idea of what the possible range of support possibilities is. A couple of questions. Yeah.
So when you say guaranteed but not guaranteed, if it's if the fellowships aren't guaranteed past the first year, is there like some sort of percentage that you should be looking out for if it's second, third, and fourth years that you may or may not have funding, or is it just like it's all or nothing? Just it's a gamble. It's like much roulette.
My sense is that for fellowships, the guarantee is also probably the practical max.
Really? Okay.
Because fellowships cost a lot of money, and yeah, so they're kind of a luxury item. And if they come into a big wad of cash and they can give it to you who's already there, or they can use it to try to lure some new person who hasn't agreed to come yet, they'll do that. Okay. For other types of support, though, you can expect a certain percentage of, well, I don't expect, but they will guarantee something, but in practice, quite often there are people who go beyond that. Right. But the guarantee is a sort of minimum that they're kind of pledging to you. I don't know if it's a contract in a legal sense, but there's at least some sort of pledge that most places would not want to back out of, that they're promising to you. But often it's possible a TA for additional years or something like that.
Thanks. This is more of a question for Amy and Catherine. So if you two have TA'd before, how much bearing do you think that a TA-ship has on your personal work? If I were to be offered like 6 years of all TA-ship versus like 2 years of full funding, how would you contrast those two?
You want to answer first, Amy?
I mean, I TA'd once so far in grad school, and it didn't take that much time, but it depends a lot on the class. So the class that I TA'd for, I was lucky enough to get what was called a TA-ship, but was in fact a readership, so I didn't hold sections, which was nice because sections take some time. On the other hand, so then it really interfered very little with my work. On the other hand, I taught for the first time in the spring. UCSD usually tries to give people some teaching experience before they go on the market, and that ate up all of my time and more. Like, I didn't look at my dissertation once during that quarter. And I think depending on, like, even within UCSD, like, depending on the writing program that you teach in, when you teach writing in your second, third, fourth year, that varies quite a bit. You might spend, you're in theory, you're not allowed to spend more than 20 hours a week on TA stuff, but and most faculty in the philosophy department are good about sticking to that limit or being receptive to you if you feel like you're going beyond that limit. But some people are able to make, some grad students are able to make TAing that shouldn't take 20 hours. In fact, take 20 hours. I don't know.
Yeah, in my experience, TAing can take up a lot of time. It's a trade-off, though, because you are gaining skills through TAing. You're talking to students, you're learning the material better, you're doing all sorts of things that are going to make you more marketable. So it is something. I think it would be hard to go on the job market having not done anything like that, right, and having no hands-on experience teaching. I know a lot of people who also enjoy TAing. I know some people who hate TAing. Right? And so with a fellowship, you're going to have more time for your personal work, right? This is hours that you need to be productive, that you're not being productive toward your own research. So yes, it takes away from that. I know some people struggle without structure, and TAing can provide structure. If you're the sort of person who needs to have a schedule in order to get work done, then sometimes TAing is better than being on fellowship in terms of doing research.
Yeah, I just want to add something to that, and then I'll get to your question. My own experience when I was a grad student is consistent with kind of what I've seen as DGS, which is that I'll sort of frame it the opposite way, but people think they're going to be way more productive when they're on fellowship than in fact they are. The other way of putting that is that people aren't really that much less productive when they're TAing than when they're on fellowship. I don't think there is that much difference between how much work I got done on my own work when I was TAing versus on fellowship. Now that's not true for everyone. There are some people who really, there is a huge difference, but it's fewer than they think on average.
Sorry I didn't ask you.
No, it's okay.
And just to add to that, I know actually some people who are the opposite. There are some people who need that structure of having to TA in order to keep them in the office and get some work done.
Yeah.
So, when you were talking about like the ranges of total income that you might get, they're all significantly less than I make now, just working full time. So I was wondering, just like logistically, like, are you expected to pay for, like, I mean, are you paying for, like, you're still like paying for your own apartment, like your rent, like your everything on that money? Really?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. By the way, this is why a lot of people who leave grad school with the idea that they'll come back in a couple of years don't ever come back, because they go out and they start making more money, and then they can't. How do they come back to being a grad student? So, but yeah. Now, depending on the type of job you have, there have been, I've known of cases in the past where people were in grad school rather than work as a TA for the department. They could work out something where they were working still 20 hours a week at something else. And they preferred that either because it was more money or because there was just something about that job they really, really liked. And that could work out for them. So that has happened in the past, but not too many cases I can think of that.
I just wanted to say I live with my partner. In between two incomes, I was able to pay $20,000 towards my loans this year, my first year in grad school. So if you have two incomes, it can make a huge difference. You're able to survive on his stipend and also. So there's different ways you can think about how that money is going to get spent.
In terms of like housing and maybe even meal plans and things like that, do most universities with doctoral programs offer some kind of like graduate housing? I mean, I know UCSD does, but is that the norm or is that kind of the exception?
Yeah, I think most will offer some sort of housing that you have to pay for, of course. But most places have graduate apartments, I would say. Probably not all, but most. And as far as meal plans, I don't know if I've ever heard of a grad student getting one. I mean, they might be available, but it's pretty rare for a grad student to eat in the cafeteria, don't you think?
Just because it's usually just not as cost effective. I mean, like, in terms of like, personal experience, like housing and meal plans, like outside of campus versus staying.
Even the graduate housing that you would get on campus would have a kitchen. Like, it's not like a dorm where you just have a bedroom. You have a full apartment, so you cook for yourself, generally.
In most of the places that I've like lived or been at school at, like grad housing is usually separate. It's like in a different area of campus. There's not like a cafeteria near it, and so like, you know, grad students and undergrads will be living in different parts of campus, or like at UCSD it might even be a little bit away from campus itself. So it would be a time and money and social thing, I guess.
And Haley and all of you, I mean, you can go like grab lunch at the cafeteria the days you're on campus, but usually your schedule is quite a bit different as a graduate student than it is as an undergraduate. But I mean, I can go have dinner with you guys if I want to, right? I just pay per time that I go. I think a lot of grad students just choose to eat at different restaurants on campus instead because the price is pretty
common. So if you were to get an external fellowship that doesn't cover tuition and fees, do institutions then normally match that, or are you responsible for paying that out of your stipend that you're receiving for your fellowship?
It depends on the department. What do you guys do?
We try to cover tuition and fees if people get an outside, some sort of outside funding. In large part because we want to encourage people to try to get outside funding, and one way to support that is by, ponying up the tuition and fees if they get it. I don't know if all departments will do that though.
Sometimes when grad students here haven't been able to get tuition for one reason or another, they've gone on a leave of absence, and that will still let them take the fellowship money. I don't know if all
La
the,
la la!
oh,
I did not hear that.
Sorry.
That does not happen.
I'm sure. Actually, it's probably because I think it's actually even administratively impossible to do that.
Oh my God! I never said that.
No, not that it's disallowed. That it's just like it physically can't happen the way the computer systems are set up.
Not if it's coming through the university, but some fellowships pay the student directly, and so if they're getting the stipend check, and the agency doesn't know that they're not enrolled, then it can happen, but it's supposed to.
All right. Now, well, I think also there are people who do go in absentia, which is similar to leave of absence, but that would be copacetic to get funding if you're in absentia.
As long as you're outside California at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
This is not specifically a funding question, but it could translate to one. Can you break down the quarters here, how they happen here at UCSD?
You mean just the schedule, the temporal schedule?
Yes.
Oh, there's fall quarter that's roughly end of September to early to mid-December, and then there's 2 quarters after break. There's winter goes from early January till end-ish of March or mid-March, and then spring is very end of March until early June-ish. So what it means is that we start about a month later than semester schools, and we end up going about a month later, but it's still about the same time off in the summer. It's just sort of shifted over.
How common is summer funding?
I don't know in general how common it is here. What do you think, Amy? It's probably...
It really has depended. So like when I started, I think basically everybody who wanted summer funding got it, but summer funding here is pretty heavily dependent on how many students are signing up for summer session classes. And for reasons that I don't think anybody really gets, enrollment has dropped, I think in all across the board kind of, but in philosophy certainly summer session enrollments have dropped, and so there have been fewer spots for advanced grad students to teach classes, and also fewer spots for everybody to TA summer classes, and so that's made funding hard to get. I would suggest that you won't have a ton of money when you are if you're a grad student somewhere. Like the stipends just aren't that high no matter where you go, but you should try to save something unless you're guaranteed some funding. Because even if it's likely that you'll get a TA-ship, you don't want to take the chance that you won't, and then you'll have nothing to live on. Makes it harder for those 9 months, but it's possible to do if you live like a grad student.
Yeah, for some reason the last year it dipped, and we don't know if that's a statistical, and maybe even the year before there was a little bit of a dip, I'm not sure, but it's not clear if that's just a statistical fluctuation or if that's a long-term trend. That's one of the sources of summer funding here is teaching a course in the summer or TAing for a course that's taught in the summer. There's also RA-ships that some faculty get that are used to support some grad students. And that kind of depends on the faculty member to apply for those funds and then distribute them to a graduate student. I don't really know like the percentage of students who want summer support to the percentage of those who end up getting it. I'm not really sure what that percentage is. I would guess it's more than half, but I don't really know how much more than half.
And
go ahead.
You can definitely take that into consideration when you're considering different departments' offers. So, for example, I mean, the place that I went, University of Florida, my first 4 years I was guaranteed summer support. I had 12 months a year, which is really nice, whereas some other places were just going to fund me 9 months a year. and that's definitely something you could think about when you're comparing things.
If you're thinking about taking a gap year, is it possible to apply for an RA-ship in a program? Or do you have to be enrolled?
You mean a gap year before you enter? It's probably wouldn't be possible if you do it before you apply and are accepted. If you applied and were accepted and then deferred acceptance for a year, it would probably also be pretty rare the department would do that, but at least it might be administratively possible if you were accepted. I don't know. Do you have?
I've heard of people doing, instead of a postdoc, people do a postbac where they get hired on somebody's grant. Now, I don't know about in the humanities, but so like instead of getting hired as a postdoc, sometimes you could be hired on a person's grant, but I think it's pretty rare.
Could you speak a little bit to deferrals? I don't know if both of you or either of you have something to add on that, but applying and getting accepted and then deferring that for a year like you might do for college. Mm-hmm. My understanding had been that it doesn't look great to turn down funding that people have offered for a year, but
well, maybe it depends on that what you mean, but in the case, like if someone apply, this happens to us not every year, but it's not infrequent that someone will apply, we'll accept them, and they'll just want to defer for a year.
Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Well, because we're not giving them funding
right
for that year, so
okay.
There's nothing like.
But even turning it down, it doesn't seem like, I don't know. There's no impression given. But
no. Well, you're not really turning it down. You're just saying, I've got something else going on in my life. You know, I'm going to be in the Peace Corps for another year, as it turns out, or whatever.
Right.
And that's fine.
Now, some places may not want you to do that. Sure. I don't know, but in the cases where the student has wanted to defer admission here, it's not been a problem.
Okay.
In fact, one of the incoming grad students that we're going to have starting this fall was a deferral from the year before.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if you'd be able to answer it, but if you do take a year off and then you want a position similar to, being an RA or something like that, what's a good thing that you could, cost effectively do in a university? Because when I think about all this, like sort of a way of transitioning in, getting more experience before going into grad school. I don't know how to phrase this. Like, I want to teach, and I want to have some experience before grad school, but I don't particularly want the kind of experience that we're talking about now because I don't know if I'm going to get the fellowship and all that stuff. So if I do take a year off, I was wondering if there's any similar positions like that a university could offer.
Like to teach?
That are paid. Like anything is similar to TAing or interning or something like that.
I mean, technically, yes, you could get hired, in theory, as a lecturer or something, although I think you would have a lot of competition from people who already have graduate degrees. At UCSD, the policy for TA-ships is, the department has to first try to hire people who are current students, but if hypothetically they can't fill that position, they're allowed to hire non-students as long as they put together a letter saying this is why we're doing this exception. So in theory, it's possible. So you want to take a year off before going to grad school, but you want to stay at a university and teach as preparation for going to grad school.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's any way of getting teaching experience that is paid.
Well, it would be paid if you did it at all.
Yeah.
But I've never really heard of that.
Outside the university, there's things like that, right? Like people do. Well, people do Teach for America. People do AmeriCorps. I taught for a year at AmeriCorps and then worked at a nonprofit before grad school. I mean, it's similar. You have a stipend and you have some help with living expenses and things. It's not through a university because usually the university positions are reserved for students at the university.
I was able to travel to Thailand and teach graduate students English. So there are options for traveling abroad or staying in the United States and finding other sorts of work that is teaching work that people with bachelor's degrees are eligible for. You just kind of have to look around the work. And that's the sort of thing I think several people have mentioned that they'd be willing to talk to people about. So just, I think just get in contact with grad students.
If a school doesn't accept a deferral for 1 year, is it likely that they'll accept you the next year if you apply with the same?
Well, it's certainly not guaranteed. I mean, because you would be back in the admissions procedure. Now, if you got it once, that probably speaks favorably to your odds of getting accepted again, but it wouldn't be a guarantee. Because, you know, a whole bunch of other awesome people might apply that year, or someone who's in a bad mood might be looking at your application that year as opposed to someone who's in a good mood the first year.
Yeah. Save yourself the trouble.
Yeah, but that's why if you can, just defer if you know that's where you want to go. Anything else?
Oh, yes. So most places that I've seen say absolutely no deferrals. Is that true?
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that surprises me.
That's surprising me too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, other grad students at my school have told me that if you really because my concern is that, like, I really want to do Fulbright, and, like, if I get an email, like, I can't, I don't know, I find it, like, more beneficial for me to go to Fulbright.
So in the UC shoot, I'm pretty sure you can do Fulbright and also enroll. Because we have the in absentia option.
Okay, all right.
But that's mostly for people who are doing it sort of as part of their graduate program, like as part of their graduate research, whereas if you're doing it just after your bachelor's degree, it's probably like a separate project usually.
Yeah. But, like, actually, like, most websites will say absolutely no deferrals.
Wow.
I mean, you definitely cannot defer
Fulbright.
Fulbright.
Very negotiable.
Interesting. Yeah, we defer all the time, and it's not a big deal. And I don't know why other places would have that kind of issue. Well, the one reason they might have that issue is that if they've been burned before, right? Someone said they would defer for a year, and they ended up not coming. Instead, what they did is they applied to a bunch of places again the following admission cycle, got into a place they liked better, and then turned the first place down. So the deferral was really just a safety net, like, okay, I'll tell you I'm deferring, but that's just because I'll go there if I don't get into a better place. That's the only reason I can think anyone would care.
But, like, the Fulbright is so prestigious. I'm UCSD's Fulbright program advisor, so pro Fulbright. But it is very prestigious, so I would think that maybe even in that case, you could tell the program, look, the reason I'm not coming is not that I'm applying again next year. I really want to come to you guys. It's just that I have this Fulbright, and they might be willing to negotiate on that. Maybe. I mean, it's worth trying. And I agree with you that the Fulbright would be an amazing experience that you wouldn't want to give up.
Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next what is Megan here? Oh, we're gonna hear a few words from Megan. She's the, I guess. Well, come on in.
Okay, sorry, just a 5-minute break.
Oh, should we take? Oh, okay. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay. So the closest one that's open right now, I think, is the one over in Mandeville. Have you been there yet?
Not sure.
Would you want so? I have coffee, and we can make coffee in the coffee machine if you want. Does anybody else want a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, raise your hand if you want a cup of coffee. It's gonna take a few minutes because we're gonna have to run them individually, but all right.
Do you need help?
Yeah.
Sure. But I also will have to see how many cups we have. But if you want a cup of coffee, come to the mailroom and we'll get cups of coffee.
What is that?
Yeah.
There. What is that?
It's a camera. Yeah. we're live streaming all the workshops to the people who applied but weren't accepted.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's why I thought it was back.
So I have a question because I have a friend at Georgetown who's doing a research assistantship in a public policy program. I'm wondering how she.
It's like this weird 0-calorie cranberry grapefruit drink in the cafeteria. I got it because of the color. It's not.
So is it an option or is
Yeah.
that take a start time?
No.
I think those stupid choices.
Do you have?
I have that an HDMI connection. That's it. I also have a USB.
If only the prettier things would work.
Okay.
I can investigate. And if it's not a good sense, yeah.
That's not really tacky tasting things, like hot pink and slippery print.
I feel that too.
But I have a USB. So here's how it was there. Okay, that's fine. I don't need the PowerPoint.
Sure.
Yes.
They love us leaving.
I do a lot of like GRE prep tutoring. That's something that you can make money that way.
I worked at a restaurant this summer where basically all the servers and all the staff were in some kind of grad school, and they all had like different amounts of flexibility in their schedule, but like they make pretty good money.
I'm sure I might wait for grad school. I will decide, but I sort of want. So finding out about funding and go out and like sort of yeah. It was more like a round. So like I was thinking to get funding to get your PhD.
Maybe a lot of people just don't apply because they are turned off by the idea of having to work. Yeah.
I think I know a few people who like have applied to master's programs because they somehow thought it would be cheaper to go for 2 years, not knowing that like you don't really get funding for your master's.
Yeah. Well, but it's like I'm preparing for like do we want to do that? I just wanted to make sure that it's called maybe I'll apply for research thing.
Oh, just.
Like my school, like they only send one.
Oh, wow.
You'll apply to programs that
They don't want to shame themselves.
yeah, it's really competitive. I was so mad last year. The person from New Jersey went to like GU or something. They just were born in New Jersey.
Is the Fulbright one of those ones that you have to apply through your institution?
Yeah, I think so.
No.
But like,
Usually your institution has an advisor.
yeah.
My cousin did it. She graduated after she did.
Yeah, we can do that.
And the handouts.
Oh, yeah.
And then just whatever extra ones on it.
It's like really flexible. And sometimes, like, if you'll get into a master's program, you can apply as your undergraduate school as your graduate school.
Just a couple of these around.
Yeah. Yeah. Could I have another? It's like she's like has to do
Yeah, no, it's allowed the rest of the spots.
How good does something like that look on your resume?
Marguerite, and figure out what article to use. Do you want to just do it right after?
What? Yes. Okay. So no, right now. Okay, cool.
Oh, then that's nice.
Yeah, so y'all gather. So do you have an article that you'd like to write about?
That's okay.
Yes, I think I want to do those. Okay. So you have between Tolstoy and the poem thing. It's Tolstoy writes still. It's not story. Okay. I could do it. It's really
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can.
Maybe when Gabby comes back, y'all can talk.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. She's really good. She knows her stuff.
Yeah. Great stuff to be hearing about too.
Yeah, she's a good resource to have.
Yeah.
Cool deal.
This is version 2 of that. Version 1 was this like 5-page monstrosity of like every link that I like on related topics, which I'm super happy to send out by email later, but was not useful or feasible as I found out.
Oh, this is nice.
Well, because it's really difficult. Like I want to do it her, and she wants to do generics.
But I don't have to. If you want to do generics, yeah. I don't.
We're on the little side, but you're meant to make your own time.
I was trying so I didn't prevent it.
Amy had grounds.
And it's like
Well, how? And Kagan chapter 10.
we have a case team, so
I would rather not be taken, but yeah. I mean, there's
we have like 5 games.
there's 5 of us. I don't think she said one special.
I would rather not take so I don't want to like pick up in the
It's just fine. Oh, really?
I don't know. We have
you're lucky, but okay. So I mean, like, I've been building. So I have that'll be pretty awesome.
Right.
I'm sorry? Oh, 2? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I can do big ones. If you want. And then you can do
Buy a case of Red Bull or something.
Yeah.
People have to like run out and get coffee. Unfortunately, in the summer, in the school year, there's actually some coffee places like really near the apartment, but in the summer they're all closed.
Yeah.
So it's a total pain.
No, we had to change our sort of pattern because
The department coffee is so bad that it's infeasible to like drink that in seminar breaks, but everyone has a coffee problem, so we run across campus. And recently the grad students decided to solve this by buying secret curry that we keep in the grad room. I haven't told any of that to you.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah.
Oh, my lips are sealed.
So, yeah, thank you.
I won't rat you out.
I mean, the problem is as soon as everyone hates talk, apparently there's at least one person on the faculty who will not reveal themselves that likes the department coffee, and that's why it hasn't moved. I mean, that's why it hasn't changed.
You know what the name of the
Yeah, there's actually a decent place like right down at the bottom here, but they're just not open in the summer, unfortunately. Yeah.
And were you saying UCSD doesn't start until you're on the quarter system?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So it'll start in September.
Yeah, in fact, our first day of classes is like October 1st or 2nd this year.
Goodness.
Yeah.
I was like 2 weeks or something.
Yeah.
What? Quarter system? Are all of these?
Berkeley is on a semester system, but I think the rest are quarters.
Winter quarter is the hardest. Wasn't it? Like how big it is? Winter quarter is so difficult coming out of semester.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just because it starts so
And
early?
fun. A lot of.
No, it wasn't. I don't think it's hot, but I like taking classes as long as I
Oh,
so I wasn't
okay.
ready to leave winter break. But then like halfway through winter quarter, I was like, okay, now I really need to start. And so
Yeah.
and by like week 7 or boys.
Yeah, the thing that really threw me off was in my undergrad we had like a Thanksgiving break and a fall break. Fall break was like this distinct extra break that was sort of, yeah, and then I still plan my semesters around that, even though it's been 2 years and it still hasn't happened. I just keep thinking, okay, well, I'll get a head start on my midterm papers over fall break, and then Thanksgiving is here.
Wow.
Missed something.
Me too.
Well, maybe, I think there's still one, how many people? One person? 2 people?
One in teacher.
Well, I'm sure they'll be here any second. Maybe we can just get started. You want to do that?
Whatever's fine. I'm not. I can fill as much time as I need to fill or not fill as much time.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started with the next little part here. So this is, I'd like to introduce Megan Fairchild. She's, well, you're the representative of MAP, Minorities and Philosophy, up at USC.
Yes.
And she's going to talk to us about MAP.
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Megan Fairchild. I'm entering my 3rd year as a grad student at USC in Los Angeles. I am just sort of philosophically, I study metaphysics and philosophical logic. As far as MAP goes, I'm the representative for the USC chapter. I'm the regional coordinator for the Southeast, the Midwest, and the West Coast. We had to split the Northeast into 2 regions because it's so concentrated. And I'm also one of the 3 national organizers. So just so you have an idea of what MAP is before I get going, we're basically a collection of philosophy students. Our main goal is to facilitate increased participation of underrepresented groups in academic philosophy. So today I want to give you a little bit of a background about MAP, what kinds of problems we take ourselves to be responding to, the kind of structure that we have, and reasons that we think that that's a way to start addressing these problems. Something that'll come out in a little bit, we have chapters at different departments across the United States. We're now starting to be international. So I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that chapters have been doing over the course of this year. People have been up to some really cool stuff. We're also, so a big component of MAP is this end of the year report that we're doing. So this is our 1st year. So end of our annual report, which will be coming out shortly for the first time. So what we do at the end of the year is we have all of the chapter representatives meet on Skype. We discuss what everybody has done over the course of the year, and then we're going to publish a publicly available report about things that people found. So I'm going to share with you guys kind of a sneak preview of some of the stuff that'll be in there, interesting trends we noticed from different chapters. And then I want to finish by doing a little bit of brainstorming. And for help, actually, we've been looking to do more undergraduate support. A lot of chapters have done really cool local things. We'd like to do some more stuff at the national level. So I want to talk a little bit about ways that MAP, as a national organization, can help undergraduates, particularly undergraduates applying to graduate school. Okay, so I don't know how much you all know about the sort of data on representation in the profession right now. There have been a lot of studies over the past 10 years, and the data goes back and forth because some of it's hard to get, self-reported, stuff like that. But the most recent data says that 21 women make up only 21% of philosophy faculty in the United States. That's both part-time and full-time philosophy faculty, and receive only 25 to 28% of the doctoral degrees that are awarded in the United States. So compare that. I have a chart that I can send you if you're interested. But compare this to, let me make sure I get the numbers right. So 28%, let's say 28% of the doctoral degrees in philosophy are awarded to women. That's compared to 60% in linguistics, 48% in biochem, 41% in history, 30% in math, and philosophy comes out ahead of physics, engineering, and computer science. So we're really anomalous as a field and also sort of as a humanities field in particular. This is not just a problem at the professional level, at the graduate and faculty level. Only 31% of the bachelor's degrees awarded in the United States to philosophers are awarded to women. And the comparisons are similar to the other fields. Okay, so those are kind of problematic statistics in their own right. What's most interesting, though, is the things that cause those statistics and the problems that come from those statistics being the case, right? I don't want to go into all of the climate problems. I'm really interested to talk to you about this later if you'd like. But one consequence of underrepresentation in philosophy is that women sort of lack mentors that are like them, that can speak to their experiences as women in philosophy. You can end up with hostile climates when you're sort of the only woman in a given classroom. So MAP is attempting to respond to that. What's really good is that this issue has gotten more attention over the past year. So actually, I want to talk a little bit about this because this is exciting. So it's gotten more attention outside of philosophy as well. I don't know if any of you have seen, there was an NPR article fairly recently called Name 5 Women, I think. Well, it was Name 5 Women, Bet You Can't. Name 5 Women in Philosophy. There was also a New York Times series that was 5 articles, I believe, written by women in philosophy. Really cool series on women in philosophy. There are also something you should be aware of. Philosophers are major bloggers. They're really interested in the internet. So there are a number of blogs that are dedicated to discussing these issues. So good ones are like feminist philosophers. There's one, Philosophical Spaces, that I found recently that's about climate issues in philosophy. There's also, I can send out later through you maybe, a long list of links to all of these. I had a handout, but you can't click on handouts, so I'll send it. But a pair that's really worth looking at is What It's Like in Philosophy, or What It's Like and What We're Doing About What It's Like. Those are like stories from women in philosophy. Okay, and then another set of really interesting things that are responding to these problems of representation. There are a number of committees and projects happening. So there is the Gender Conference Campaign. So this is a campaign to restore gender balance at conferences, so invited speakers and things like that. There's also the committee, the APA Committee on Inclusiveness, and the APA Committee on, or well, there are a number for the APA, but the Committee on Inclusiveness has a syllabus project. So this is about restoring diversity in syllabi handed out to undergraduates and introductory courses. Anyway, so there's a bunch of cool stuff going on. I tell you all of this to tell you a little bit about how MAP fits into it. So MAP is an organization that's made up primarily of graduate students. We're unique in that respect. Most of these organizations are run through the APA. They're professional organizations. MAP targets graduate students because when you're a graduate student, you're in sort of a unique position to engage with different stages of the profession. You're instructing undergraduates. You're also in a position to interact with undergraduates as a mentor. You are yourself a student, and you are future faculty, future professional in the field. Okay, so we have three-ish goals. We don't usually separate them into three, but you can clump them. And these are on the handout. So our three goals: provide a forum for discussion of issues connected to the underrepresentation of women and other minorities. I should note, I've been talking about underrepresentation of women mostly. I mean, it's relevant, but there are a few reasons for that. One is that that's kind of the best data that we have. A lot of the data that's been collected lately has been targeting the representation of women in the field, but we are really interested in problems facing other groups as well. So we're not just a gender and philosophy group. Okay, so provide a forum for discussion of issues connected to the underrepresentation of women and other minorities. Provide a visible network of peers and allies. So this is combating one of the problems that I mentioned earlier. If you're in a field that's only 20% women, you will often be in rooms where you are the only woman. This provides a way of sort of interacting with other women in the field because they're there. They're just spread out. And also combat problems stemming from underrepresentation. And like I said, these are in particular climate problems, which vary a lot based on which department you're in, what context you're in. So I'm going to pause here because I also know I'm talking really fast because I just had a latte. So I should have said this at the beginning. I'm really interested in being interrupted. If you have any questions at any point, you should definitely interrupt me. Yeah.
Do you have any? Do any of the statistics you have on women in philosophy break down the different groups of women? Is this like 28% of doctoral degrees are white women, or is there...
Pretty much. So let me pull up the honestly. So let me see if I can pull up my. So on the website, I think we have this statistic. Context for the statistic. We do have breakdowns of like ethnic minorities. Mm-hmm. It tends to be between 2 and 3% for any non-white male, and those are males. There is not a breakdown that I've seen before because I think usually it's less than 1% of non-white women. So usually these statistics are about, sort of lumping it all together because it gets depressing. Yeah, I can also send the so a website that will be on the list that I send you. The APA has a page for resources pertaining to diversity generally. The bottom half of that page is all links to studies that have been done by philosophers and by non-philosophers, and all of the data that the APA has gathered recently. And also the APA has recently started gathering data at the meetings, so about who's presenting, who's attending what presentations, things like that. Yeah, so I'll send all of that out and try to put it nicely. Were there any other questions about the background before I move on? Oh. Okay. Let me make sure there was nothing else I wanted to say there. Okay. So a little bit about our structure and the way that we think this structure is a way of combating some of these issues. So we have kind of 3 main components. We have chapters, we have a mentorship program, and we have a national organization, which is just kind of the umbrella under which the other two parts fall. So the chapter structure, what we do is we equip graduate students usually, though we've had 3 chapters started by undergrads in the past few months, actually. One is at a department that doesn't have a graduate program at all, so it's an only undergraduate organization, which is really cool. So what we do is we equip primarily graduate students, sometimes undergraduate students, to start chapters at their department. We encourage chapters to operate as independently as possible, so that they can be responsive to the needs of their department. So I'll get into this a little bit later, but most chapters do things like reading groups. Some are really research oriented. They're doing things like developing climate surveys or collecting data about people enrolled in introductory courses, stuff like that. So those are organized by region. The regional structure is really loose. Like I said, I'm the regional coordinator for 2/3 of the United States. So we are trying to get chapters to interact more with each other, but right now things are operating pretty independently. The other component of the organization is the mentorship program. And this is something that I really, really encourage you all to take advantage of. So we have on the website, let me see if I can show you. I don't know if you can see it from where you are. Okay, so this is our website, and my screen is messed up. But if you go over to where it says mentors, there is a drop down, and it has graduate mentors and faculty mentors. Right now we have more than 50 volunteer faculty mentors. We actually had almost 150 volunteer, but we didn't want to make it sort of unwieldy scrolling through the page to find somebody to contact, but we may end up with a rotating volunteer list. And we have more than 20 graduate student mentors. So what the mentors do is they've agreed to provide mentorship very broadly construed by email or Skype. So there are resources that you can contact to ask for advice about being a woman or a member of an underrepresented group in philosophy. You can ask them about applying to graduate school. You can ask them about professionalization. We've had people contact them just to ask sort of about their experiences and whatever advice they have given your stage. Something that we would really like to do at the end of this, I'd like to, if you're willing, collect your email addresses and names, and then I'll put you in touch with mentors directly. We're trying to partner with sort of workshops like this and get people involved in the mentoring program. And what we'd like is for these mentors to be more long-term mentors for you. So throughout the application process, throughout your first year of grad school. Okay, so that's the mentorship program. What's really cool about it, like I said, is we have graduate mentors. They're primarily there to help undergrads, but we also have the faculty mentors, so it's a resource for graduate students as well. Okay, so the national organization. When I say national organization, I mean myself and the 2 other organizers. Our job is to try to encourage chapters to work on collaborative projects. We've been working on a few things that should be coming out in the next year. One thing we're trying to develop right now are some resource banks, basically. So one of the resources we're working on developing is a standardized climate survey. So a number of chapters have independently started working on climate surveys just to find out sort of what the climate is like at their department, uncover information that might equip them to sort of better impact their departmental culture. We're working on developing a standardized climate survey. We are working on providing resources to chapters that are interested in collecting data about, in particular, pipeline phenomena. So is anyone familiar with the sort of pipeline problem in philosophy? Okay, so you know how I gave you the statistics earlier about there's 31% of bachelors awarded to women, 25 to 28% of PhDs, and then 21% of faculty. So that's called the pipeline problem. People have noticed that there's this sort of drop-off in minority participation in philosophy as you advance. And that's not just features like women aren't getting hired or women aren't getting accepted to graduate school. It's, that shows up in the application numbers as well. It shows up in the application numbers. And it actually starts a little earlier, so I don't have the exact number, but the steepest drop is from enrollment in 100-level philosophy courses to declaring philosophy majors. So you're starting at around 50% for introductory philosophy courses, and then you drop to 30% for majors. Okay, so there's not really fine-grained data about pipeline problems like that, so a number of chapters have been trying to do research by doing surveys at the end of 1, 2, and 3, 400 level philosophy courses at their universities. And we want to provide some resources to chapters that are interested in getting more information about that. So there are a few other projects that we're working on that I want to save for the brainstorming session at the end, because they're specifically about undergrad applying to graduate school. Okay, pausing for any questions about the structure. Yeah.
Okay, I might have missed this, but do you guys only have chapters in like graduate schools, or do undergraduate schools also have chapters?
Good. So we just had someone start the first sort of undergrad only chapter. Clemson, they just started a chapter, and they don't have a graduate program.
Okay.
And they're getting ready to do some really great stuff, and we're super happy to support that. Because we're a primarily graduate student organization, some of the stuff we do like supporting people that are TAing will not be as relevant for the undergrad chapters, but we make an effort to like work particularly closely with the undergrad organizations. And we've had 2 chapters, I believe, Berkeley's chapter and UNC Chapel Hill's chapter were both started by undergrads, even though they do have graduate programs there. They're hybrid chapters. So yeah.
And what's, I guess, like the guidelines to establishing a chapter at your campus, your undergraduate campus?
So we have recommendations about the sorts of conditions that need to be in place for something like this to be successful. It's really hard to run an organization if you don't have 3 really dedicated people. 3 is a ballpark. 1 super person can be,
What about 5 kind?
Turns out that is a major game changer. Yeah, 5 kind of dedicated people sometimes don't get much. No. So what we want is for you to demonstrate to us that you have sufficient interest to get off the ground. The official application asks that you list a faculty contact, just so that we know that you have some support within the department. Like I said, well, I'll get into more detail on this in a second, but a lot of what you can do as a MAP chapter doesn't require any funding at all. We ask you to say what funding sources you're looking for, if you're looking for any, but sometimes you don't need any funding. But an interest meeting and then an email to me. I'm the new chapter coordinator as well, so help you get off the ground. Yeah.
Do the faculty advisors who are starting the chapter have to be female philosophers?
Not at all. Not at all. So yeah, like I said, we're minorities and philosophy because we want to work with any underrepresented group in the hopes that eventually sort of women and we'll shave down that list, right, of people that are underrepresented in philosophy. But they don't have to be at all. Well, all we want is to know that you've spoken to someone in your department and your department has said, yeah, we're gonna help you get this off the ground. That's all. Yeah, it's a very easy entry level. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, so one of the misconceptions that we had in our department was that it was purely a support group or support network. So a lot of the white men who were kind of interested in that were initially unwilling to kind of approach or join the group because they thought that they wouldn't be welcome. And we went through great pains of explaining that actually it's about getting into a discussion about the issue of underrepresentation in philosophy. Right. And as grad students, we're in particular places are thinking about this issue and trying to create a more inclusive environment for our undergraduate students and so on.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of chapters realized last year that they needed and are going to start doing this year is splitting their events. So chapters are going to start having things like women and minority nights, just sort of get-togethers for members of the underrepresented groups, and that's like a support event. But most of the events have been sort of information sessions, getting conversations started, getting people that aren't aware of the problems that stem from underrepresentation or that there is an underrepresentation problem at all, getting them into the conversation. And also, I mean, at least at my department, a number of the men sort of know there's a problem, but don't know what to do about it. And I mean, I think this is the case for everyone. Most people know there's a problem, they don't know how to begin engaging with it. And that's what our chapter has been working a lot on. Which is a great lead into some of the stuff that chapters have been up to lately. Okay, lately, this year. So projects come in roughly 5 forms. The 5th form is kind of a catch-all form. So people will invite speakers and host panel discussions. People have been hosting workshops and trainings for their departments, reading groups, and then establishing undergraduate mentorship structures. So as far as speakers, these range in topic a lot. Some chapters have had dedicated speaker series on topics related to underrepresentation. So Harvard had Sally Haslinger come speak on implicit bias, stereotype threat, and microaggression in philosophy classrooms. And let's see, what's another good one? We had Anne Gary come speak on intersectionality and the relationship to philosophy. There are also people that talk about ways to start addressing it. So UMichigan had someone from their physics department come talk about women in philosophy and STEM, how models and data from the STEM fields can help us begin tackling the problem in philosophy. There have been departments that have focused on having sort of practical talks. So Harvard also had a talk on how to receive and make use of feedback from advisors. They're picking up on a really interesting problem, which is that women and minorities tend to respond really differently to feedback. So you'll notice these, there was a study done, I don't remember who did it, about the way that women and men would respond to the same comments from a professor on a paper. You know, things like "nice try" read very differently often, right? You know, at least as an undergrad, I heard that as, okay, well, I should leave. And had, you know, I would have peers come up to me and say, "Oh, my professor basically said I should try to publish this." You get very different information off of comments. And so they had a talk on how to respond to feedback and ways to interpret things like that. And then also you have people, chapters that are just trying to diversify their speaker series. So a lot of departments, and this is something that is a really good feature of a department, to have regular invited speakers come and talk about what they're working on or whatever. But given representation problems in philosophy, often these colloquium series aren't super diverse. And I think you guys are...
Yeah, this is something that we're trying to do at UCSB. Actually, Dana Nelkin was the last woman to come and give a presentation at UCSB. I think it was like a year and a half ago. There were no other women that had given a presentation in nearly 2 years beforehand. And the graduate students have started noticing the serious lack of women giving talks in our department. And so we started saying, well, can we just try to invite more women, or, you know, get some other speakers and they're talking on the issues.
Dana was the last one.
Yeah, Dana was the last.
She's faculty here at UCSD.
So I know Yale has been doing a speaker series quite a lot like that. And they've also been aiming to invite women to speak on topics that, so representation can be worse by subfield. So like in things like metaphysics, philosophical logic, phil science, things like that, not nearly as many women show up as in some of the value theory fields. And so Yale has been trying to invite women to speak on those subfields as well. So the graduate students are seeing, yeah. Oh, did you raise your hand or were you playing with your pen? Okay, I didn't know. Okay, no, it's fine. I wave my hands around while I'm listening. Okay, Right, so those are speaker series. There have been a number of really cool panel discussions. So one that Toronto did was an interdisciplinary panel session on implicit bias. Are you guys familiar with implicit bias phenomena? So this is just when you encounter someone with a particular identity, often a gender identity or a sexual identity or whatever, there are assumptions that you make about their abilities in things that are totally unrelated to those features. That's like a really broad gloss. But these phenomena show up in studies where you see people submit identical CVs, but one has a woman's name on it and one has a man's name, and they get different valuations from hiring committees. Okay, and then at USC we had a multi-part panel series on classroom discussions generally. The first one was on diversity and communication styles. So you and I were talking about this earlier, that one of the things that's been identified as a contributor to representation problems is that women and men often have different communication styles, and when you're in a male-dominated field, the communication style associated with productive conversation in that field is going to be associated with male communication styles, right? Or men's communication styles. And so we were talking about ways that as instructors you can facilitate discussions so that different communication styles don't prevent students from being heard. And then we also had another session on controversy in the classroom, how to approach ethical issues in introductory ethics class in particular. Okay, so those are speaker and panel events that have happened. Chapters have also had workshops and trainings. So one thing that I think has been particularly useful about the MAP chapter structure is that it provides sort of a group within a department that's saying, hey, it would be really useful for our department to have bystander training or sensitivity training or sexual harassment training, things like that. Because you don't always have sort of a dedicated group within a department focused on identifying those needs. So I know UCR had a workshop for their graduate students on sexual harassment with the university's Title IX office. We are looking to have the LGBTQ Center come in and give us ally safe zone training. There was also bystander training with the university's counseling center at Binghamton University. And then, yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing that I've noticed is that at a lot of universities, the sexual harassment, bystander trainings, and so on are not well suited for faculty and graduate students. So one of the things that I'm going to try to work on with our Women's Center in our Title IX office is trying to actually get a sexual harassment or bystander training that's actually suitable for academics and not just aimed at undergraduates. I've attended several of them at UCSB recently, and none of them have been at any sort of level that I think faculty or graduate students would even be willing to participate in.
Right.
That's actually one of the issues we want to try to learn with UCSB.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, we noticed, so in our end of the year report, we're hoping to have a section on, because a lot of people have tried to have trainings like this and have found that it was unsuccessful, either for that reason or for kind of a really worrisome reason that philosophers can kind of do philosophy at it. This has been a big problem. I guess one representative was saying that at a sexual harassment training they had, someone was pushing the issue that they didn't understand why complimenting a woman's hair wouldn't count as sexual harassment, though complimenting other features of her anatomy did count as. Anyway, so we're interested in, I mean, we want to continue promoting these kinds of trainings, but we also want to work on getting philosophers to hear them as well. So any ideas you have about that would be super welcome. But there have also been workshops aimed just at graduate students and aimed just at undergrads. So Binghamton also did, and I think more than one chapter has done this, has held a workshop for undergraduates on applying to graduate school. And UCR and CUNY both had workshops for TAs on developing tools for teaching to diverse groups. Okay, So I don't want to spend, I mean, this is cool stuff. So I kind of want to spend a lot of time on it. But most of our chapters function primarily as reading groups. So these come in two forms. You have chapters that are doing readings just of philosophy in various fields being done by members of underrepresented groups. Other reading groups are focused on research that's been done on representation, and kind of like the speaker series. So Pittsburgh recently did a reading group on Louise Antony's book, Different Voices or Perfect Storm, Why There Are So Few Women in Philosophy. Princeton did one on the New York Times series. We did one on connections between philosophical methodology and philosophical pedagogy and underrepresentation. So one of our meetings was on the information, the research that's been done on philosophical intuitions and how those intuitions differ across gender and other minority group identifications. And then our second, I'm going to plug a book really fast because I really like it. Our second meeting was on a paper from this book, which I highly recommend. It's called Women in Philosophy, What Needs to Change. This is, we have no affiliation with this book. This is a personal recommendation. There's a paper in there, and it's also available online by Katrina Hutchinson. It's called Sages and Cranks, The Difficulty of Identifying First-Rate Philosophers. And it's about how philosophical methodology is not often made explicit and how that might contribute to members of underrepresented groups having a hard time entering into philosophy or gaining respect once they're, yeah.
Sorry, was that an article, the article you just mentioned, was that an article in that book?
It's in this book.
And who's the author?
Katrina Hutchison. I can slide this down. It's the, yeah. I may knock all of the coffee over on my hand, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, and so then the last sort of set of things I wanted to talk about is, or the last set of things that chapters have been doing are kind of miscellaneous. Some chapters have been organizing informal get-togethers, and I think this is something that is a really, really fabulous idea that more chapters should be working on. So Binghamton and Stanford both organized weekly teas, departmental teas, or weekly departmental lunches, where faculty, grad students, and undergrads are all encouraged to hang out in the same room and interact, which is, I mean, so this is really awesome because I think something that really does contribute to many of the consequences of being a member of an underrepresented group in philosophy is that undergrads, graduate students, and faculty can sometimes operate as independent units. If you're an undergrad, you never see graduate students, or you never see women graduate students or minority graduate students. And so these sort of informal events have been really useful. CMU and Princeton have both trained their TAs in anonymous grading, so they instituted a mandatory or I guess it will be mandatory shortly, but right now it's voluntary, anonymous grading system. So at least in their logic courses and maybe in some of their introductory ethics courses, they're doing anonymous grading, which, you know, and there's data related to the implicit bias stuff that supports that as a useful way of tackling this. And then Columbia is getting ready to start a local mentorship program for undergraduates applying to philosophy graduate schools. This is in addition to our main mentorship program, so they want to have people that can meet up with undergrads sort of in person. Okay, so that's some stuff that our chapters have been up to over the course of this year. A lot of the data collection stuff isn't on here, this climate survey development and data collection stuff, because they're in the process of it. I know at Michigan, a number of their graduate students took a statistics course so that they could analyze some of the data that they got from undergrads enrolled in ethics course. Does anybody have any questions about the chapter events, or what sorts of things count as chapter events? Cool. Okay. So from all of this, I mean, all of this we got from chapters during our end of the year meeting. And things that people identified as kind of positive impacts that they've noticed over the year. I think just about every representative we had mentioned that conversations about representation, about women in philosophy, about minorities in philosophy, were kind of happening in the grad lounge or happening more fluidly after classes. It was having that kind of impact on the departmental climate, a very kind of informal one. This was outside of context of MAP events. And most people said that those conversations were really great because you had people saying, I didn't know anything about this, but now I've been thinking about it a lot. Can we talk about it? Can you tell me about your experiences? Is this thing I'm doing not good? And yeah, so things like that have been really positive. Representatives said that women in their department and other minorities in their department felt that the increase in conversation was making departments a more welcoming place because they felt that there was a way that they could talk about the issues and be heard. And there have also been sort of more tangible impacts on departmental climates. So I think at CMU they recently got 2 positions added to the how did it? Oh yeah, 2 faculty members were appointed climate liaison officers. So this wasn't really an official initiative of MAP, but it was in response to MAP being a thing at CMU that they had 2 faculty members appointed. And also mentorship structures, so these informal get-togethers that I was talking about. A number of our representatives said that they had found themselves interacting more with undergrads, that they found undergrads interacting more with faculty than they had been before MAP. And so it looks like having these hybrid chapters is allowing departments to establish mentorship structures and reinforce existing mentorship structures, right? You have a lot of people on faculty that are usually appointed undergraduate advisors, but this is sort of increasing contact points. And then, of course, undergraduate involvement. We have undergrad chapters now, which we're really excited about. Okay, so I don't want to do all of the talking. Things that we're thinking about, ways that we can help undergrads. I'm going to toss a couple out there, and then I want y'all to help me figure out more or tell me whether you think the things that I'm suggesting might be useful. There's the mentorship program. Like I said, I really encourage you to use that, and I will pass something around in a second for you all to write your names down if you're interested in me putting you in touch with a mentor directly. We are also working to develop a way to offer funding assistance for graduate applications. So I don't know if you've talked about this at all, but applying to grad school can be kind of expensive, especially in philosophy, because you're encouraged to apply to usually a lot of grad schools, and at $70 to $80 a pop, that gets pretty expensive. But we're hoping to offer sort of application scholarships. And we would have kind of an application process for that. And we're also talking about creating resources pertaining to choosing a graduate school. So as a senior in undergrad, you're often thinking about applying to graduate school, that whole process. And then in April, you get accepted, and then there's this whole new world of choosing a graduate school. And at least for me, I was aware that I needed to be thinking about departmental climates, but I had no idea how to find out about departmental climates. I had no idea what I should be looking for. So I've been thinking about putting together just a list of questions that you can ask people. So you'll go on these visits to different departments, and you'll have time to talk to graduate students, and you'll have time to talk to faculty. And we were thinking it might be useful for undergrads to know sort of what to ask to find out about climate. So those were some things we were thinking. Is there something that an organization like MAP could do in addition to that, or do you like those ideas, or do you hate those ideas? Yeah. Sorry.
All right. I just wanted to ask you a question about like funding in general. When students from individual chapters want to organize events or bring speakers, are they just on sort of a voluntary basis, or do they apply for funding from their individual departments, or does MAP help like point you in the right direction? How does that work?
All of the above. So, entire disjunction. So the way we have our funding set up right now is that we ask that chapters apply to their departments and to their universities for funding first before they apply to us. And when they apply to us, we ask them to, tell us what they applied for and basically what response they got. The reason is not that we're trying to be, stingy with our money. It's really important that departments support the chapters. So what we don't want is for MAP chapters to feel like they're not a part of the department because they're this totally externally funded group. That said, we do have funding available for chapters, and we actually didn't get any funding requests last year, and we really want to fund chapters. Mostly what our funding is suppose a chapter wants to organize a really huge event, something like a conference, we can offer funding for stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
When do you think you'll have like the funding for grad school started up and ready? Do you think it would be like within this year?
Like it to be this year for you, but we don't know right now. Yeah, we're still working on that. What we're trying to figure out right now is the application process, because there is going to have to, we don't have totally bottomless funds, so we're going to have some kind of application process. I think long term what it's going to end up being is that we have students in their junior year apply so that we can guarantee them some funding for the following year. We do want to get something off the ground this year if we can, so it'll be a different process at this point. But check back on the website. We also, at the bottom of our website, if you scroll all the way down and it's on the right, there is a listserv that you can join. So that is the general MAP listserv. We send out newsletters on that, calls for applications to stuff like this. We'll go out on that as well. If you start a chapter, or if you're a chapter representative, we have another listserv for chapter reps, and we add you to that. Yeah.
If we're interested in starting one of these programs, are we able to like go to USC or somewhere that does and attend like one of their events? And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the way that you're going to get the most, two things. As far as starting a chapter, it's attending one of our, I mean, I don't know how to quite say this. Our events aren't kind of, they're events hosted by MAP, but they're not all about MAP. This is the first time I've talked for an hour about MAP. Because usually it's, things that we're sponsoring, but they're sort of all over the place. But yeah, I mean, we can, if you contact me, I can put you in touch with a local chapter, and you can sort of shadow their chapter for a little while if you want help getting started. Especially undergrad chapters, we're encouraging them to work closely with other chapters in the region because that just gives you more person power to host events.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So say I go to a very small school, the percentage of girls that we even have in our very small philosophy department is very minimal. So like if it didn't work out that a chapter could be established, are there other ways that maybe MAP could be involved in some small way, or like at least advertised, like speak like talks that might be in the general area,
Great.
Or things like that?
Let me write that down because that is a fantastic question. Sorry. So in the Northeast,
University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. So it's like an hour and a half away from the Twin Cities, and I know people go to the Twin Cities for like events here and there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if something like that. We tried to start just a general club, and that didn't get off the ground.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, so as we start developing more national programs, we'll be able to do more like that. Try to send things to universities that don't have MAP chapters and offer support to undergrads there. We did send out, we went on a really lengthy email campaign. We emailed, I think, the top, maybe every department that was listed on the Philosophical Gourmet Report and told them about MAP, emailed undergraduates.
That's totally how we found out.
Yeah, so we emailed undergraduate advisors, graduate advisors, everybody. But yeah, no, that's really good. I will think about how to start reaching out to universities that don't have MAP chapters. I mean, one thing that you can do is start a chapter, and on your application say, look, there are 3 of us, and we aren't in a position to be hosting events, but we want to be talking about this. We want to have access to the resources that come with MAP, and we can work with you to make that worthwhile. Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't see any reason that I don't see any reason that that's not for there to be a chapter. That's a good question. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask you one more thing about how mentoring works.
Yeah.
So you said that there's on the website there's a list of a variety of professors, and that. So how are they matched?
Good. You pick.
Just find them, email them, hunt them down.
Yep. So
cool.
That's also I'm thinking about. I love emails. I'm the sort of person that, like, when my friend's computer, I also love talking to strangers. When my friend's computer breaks, I'm like, oh, please let me call the helpline, right? So, but my sister would just keel over if she had to email someone off a website. You can also email one of the organizers and we'll match you with someone, because I understand that scrolling through a list of people that you've never met and emailing them out of the blue is not everybody's jam. So yeah, there are a number of ways to make use of the mentorships.
That's great. Would it be helpful to like create just a standard, hi, I'm interested in getting a mentor sort of letter or something,
yeah.
So you could just like fill your name in if you're kind of afraid.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Me personally?
Yeah, if there was a letter and like mentors online knew that they would get letters with people's names attached to them, but at least it gave you a way of communicating your interests.
I can imagine some people would find that useful.
Yeah,
definitely. It's not my cup of tea, but
yeah, the one worry I would have about that is that people receiving the emails might develop that kind of like email blindness, where you get too many emails that look the same and they stop having content at all. But I think something we could do is make more explicit on the website that we are willing to orchestrate the matching process as organizers, I think, and we can sort of offer help.
Or maybe
that way.
you could at least like have a form on the website that went to the organizers.
Yeah.
And then do the follow-up. So instead of having to like explicitly email you, you just say a form, hi, I'm interested in mentoring, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Right.
And then you could follow up.
Excellent. I saw a couple hands, so I saw your hand first, and then you. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there are any collaborative efforts between like the APA committees and MAP.
Yeah, so we have a representative on the Committee for the Status of Women. They're the ones that have been running the climate surveys over the course of this year. Well, I mean, I guess they've been doing it for longer, but it sort of has become more well known this year. And we have a representative on that committee. We've also been in contact with their committee on inclusiveness. We've been talking to them about the syllabus project. We don't have any sort of super official collaborations there. We're also hoping to start having meetups at the APA events. So I don't know, are you all familiar with APA events? So there are 3 giant conferences. Philosophers overtake a city for 3 days. And then it's weird, you walk around coffee shops and you're hearing these like people arguing about philosophy and you've never seen it. Anyway, it's really exciting. So there's an Eastern one, a Central one, and then a Pacific one. And what we're hoping to do is get space at each and start having, or at least at the Central and the Pacific, and start having, yeah. Well, yeah, okay, at all 3. So yeah, we're hoping to, if we don't have space at the Eastern, we will have a separate event. But meetups for MAP members. The Central and the Pacific are really fun though. Anyway, yeah. So that's right now where we stand on collaborating with the APA, but I think we're going to be applying to a diversity grant with them at some point. So, yeah.
So I was wondering, just out of curiosity, do you have any women of color represented in your list of veterans?
Yes, absolutely.
I've actually never met a female philosopher of color above the undergraduate level.
Yes, I had a friend who was applying for jobs, and she was an Asian American woman and had never met another Asian American woman in philosophy. So let me see. Yeah, so it's a list of 50, but we have. So what we do is we have their name, their website, a picture of them, and their contact information. I don't know who's on the list off the top of my head, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one of my PowerPoint slides, I took all of the mentor pictures and put them all there, and it's really remarkable. It's super cool. I don't usually see philosopher picture collages that look like that. It's nice. Oh, another thing that we're gonna have soon. This is like a fun thing and not really a event thing. Have any of you seen the Huffington Post did a special on this? Portraits of philosophers done in the style of famous artists. Did you guys see this? So there's like girdle done in like Art Nouveau style, flip a foot. There's all sorts of stuff. So the artist who did those is a graduate student at USC, and we're working with her to commission a series on women and minority philosophers. And we're sort of, yeah, I'm really excited about it. So if you have any suggestions about philosophers that you'd like included in the series, we're doing 12, and we've only given her 4 officially. So if you have any suggestions. Cool. Yeah.
Does Matt like have any like a resource guide put together about like educating like philosophy departments about the issues of like needing more women or people of color in the departments? Just because like I know faculty in my school who like are supportive of the issues but don't really know like things to do, or just like I don't know, just like more like how-to guides or like how to structure like open like different communication styles in the classroom.
Good. So right now we don't have a general how-to guide. The closest thing to that we've been working on, I mentioned the data gathering resource and the climate survey resource. We're also working on a TA best practices resource, and that's kind of how TAs can adjust their pedagogy to be responsive to these issues. That's the closest, but you're right that something like how to start these conversations would be really useful, especially picking up on your point in a place where you don't have a map chapter to give context to those discussions. The APA has a really fantastic resource list as well. There are no, as far as I know, there are no how to, like, sort of very practical guides on there. There's a lot of research on there. There are a lot of talking points.
Not quite on the topic of MAP, but maybe hopefully in the future in collaboration with MAP.
Yeah.
There's another organization, and I don't want to say it incorrectly. I think they're at Yale. It's called Wi-Fi, and they do short philosophical videos. Some of it's on critical thinking, some of it's on philosophical content. But in the long run, they're hoping to do a series of videos that are dedicated to just dealing with the issues of gender and race issues in philosophy. So, hopefully we'll at least be able to have they might function as conversation starters, and might help philosophers like get a better grasp of what's going on in the field. So, yeah, I'm on board. It's called Wi-Fi. WI-PHI.com.
I thought of something while you were saying that as well. Does anybody have any other questions? I think I'm eking up on, am I eking up on dinner time? I don't know what your schedule is like. I'm happy to keep talking. So one other thing that I wanted to ask about was the mentorship program. Do you feel, this is a brainstorming question, so your undergrads, you get on the website, you're looking for, scrolling through the mentor pages. Are you more likely to reach out to graduate students or faculty? Do you have feelings about like which mentorship structure would be of more use to you? Faculty? Okay. Is that a more likely to have definitive answers to questions kind of thing? This is not, I'm not like insulting. Yeah.
I don't know. I find that reaching out to graduate students is a little more helpful because they can really cue you in on what the environment's actually like.
Okay.
As opposed to like academically what you need.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say it would depend on the question.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So it would be good to continue to have both.
Yeah.
Are research interests posted with both of those things?
They're not. Do you think that would be useful?
That would be
okay.
hugely
Cool.
useful.
Okay. Cool.
Because then you're just looking for like cool names.
Yeah.
Nice faces.
Yeah.
Cool hair.
Symmetrical.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we didn't have research interests listed originally was that we were thinking that the value was going to be more general questions than that, but I now realize that that's clearly not the case. So there's major value to seeing people in your subfield. Yeah.
I don't know, I might just not heard you, but are the institutions they're affiliated with?
Linked
Cool,
to,
yeah.
link. I mean, so let me pull up the page. It doesn't. So all it has visible on the page is the name and then a contact link.
Cool.
But the name links to the website usually.
Awesome.
Though not all grad students have websites. I don't know.
So I'm listed as one of the mentors, and like if you click on my name, it gives you my research interests, where I'm located,
okay, cool,
and like a brief bio.
Oh, that's new. That's very exciting. Okay, sorry, I don't run the website. This is really exciting.
So it gives a little bit of information about what.
Look at that. That's awesome. Okay. Good. So a lot of that information is there, and ignore all of the failings that I just attributed to my organization.
But you have to click on the name, so it'll look like none of that information is there. So you do have to kind of sift through the name.
Yeah. I can work on making that more explicit.
Because I just imagine in some cases for students who are planning on applying to graduate school, they might just be interested in seeing, are there any MAP mentors who are at this institution that I can contact and ask questions of? Because it's already, we always suggest, well, try contacting some graduate students or some faculty ahead of time to see if you actually want to go to this institution. This might be a slightly less stressful way of gaining access.
More focused. That's one of the things we had in mind for the program.
In which case you definitely want
makes sense to have the institution. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So I don't have any more material to provide unless prompted by questions. I do have more material in response to questions. But I can comment if no one has any more questions. I can also, my train isn't for quite a while, so I can hang out and talk if any of you are interested in starting MAP chapters or in finding out whether there's a MAP chapter at your university that you haven't heard about yet. I would also like to know that if that's the case. Then I'd be happy to talk.
Okay.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.